Hi, I'm Mark Rossano reporting with Primary Vision Network. Today we're going to go through the supply chain from start to finish, looking at hydrocarbons up and down the supply chain. So first we're really going to focus on the oil oversupply throughout the world. Then that's going to lead us down into refining and what is happening in the refining world. And then lastly, we're going to really focus on and touch on food inflation and what's happening in some of the emerging markets as coronavirus rips around the world, becoming the pandemic we all thought it was in February. So here, let's just kick off with the oil oversupply, because President Trump has sent out tweets starting last week, and who never thought we would be talking about tweets in this manner, but it was enough to move the market. And the reason why is because of the gross oversupply in the market. So right now we've seen about, we estimate at about 38 million barrels a day of oversupply, just given the breakdown in demand on a global level. And that's factoring in gasoline, diesel, bunker fuel, and the different issues that are impacting just based on the lockdowns as people and economies come to a full stop. So the initial tweet was that there was going to be a cut of about 10 million barrels a day of supply. Now, the question is, who's going to eat that? Who's it going to come from? And is it enough? And the short answer is no, it is not enough. Two, we're really not sure, because now there's commentary that the Gulf of Mexico is going to be shut in, which is about 2 million barrels a day. But given the quality of that oil and how refiners are starved for quality crude, it's really difficult to see how that would make logical sense, because it would just push refiners to buy from the open water. So as we look at the Saudi, Russia, OPEC side of the equation, we've seen very little ability for them or desire to really cut, just because they've ceded market share in the world over the last, let's call it 4 years, just as the U.S. has grown on its shale dominance and really pushed that light sweet crude into the market. So now you have Russia, Iraq, Nigeria, all really excited about this, but at the same time, they've also seen their orders canceled. So supply and demand is real in the market. So you can say you're going to supply it, but is there really a demand? Is there somebody who wants your oil? Belarus, for an example, just agreed to buy Russian Urals for $4. So, by doing that, you have to think about what is the actual cost on a realized price basis. And realized prices are what's going to drive the market. So the spot market is really telling you, look, store it and try to use it later, because at this point, China, India are really kind of topped out. And then that leads us into tank tops. And this is something that's going to lead us into refining. So right now, tank tops are being talked about just because we're getting closer and closer. And the reason why it's interesting that you start talking about it is because it's not a whole number. There's a lot of things that happen when you go to store oil and or products. So oil right now, in terms of Europe, who are getting near tank tops, we have naphtha, which is the condensate, is at a 12-year high. Singapore is reaching near levels that haven't been seen in recent history, or as far back as I can go, which is, I believe, 1991. China is reaching tank tops. So where are we going to put this? And this is starting to come down to tankers and or the U.S., because we still have some of the most of availability in the market, which we see with Saudi sending in crude. So what are the refiners doing? The refiners are looking to capitalize on this in some shape, way, or form on a global level. So we've seen India ramp down by 20%. We had China during their full-on lockdown down by over 60%. And we've seen Italy, France, 30 to 40%. So when we look at this and think about, well, what is going to happen in the U.S., we assume that we're going to lose. Right now, we're at about 82% utilization rate. We think we're going to get to about 70%, because you can't turn off a refiner completely, because there's a pressure problem. You need to make sure you can fill the pipeline and then push it all the way through to make gasoline, diesel, and other. The biggest issue, and that's something that we might be able to show you, is the collapse in U.S. gasoline demand. We are now below all-time records for gasoline demand, and this is only going to get worse, because people are now where they're going to be. They've escaped from the cities to their homes, family. So now that little bit of demand is gone. Diesel was something that was holding up because truckers were using it, and you were trying to keep the supply chains whole, but even now that is gone. So we're starting to see a shutdown on the refining side. Colonial Pipeline has pulled off 20%, but we still have this oil coming in. So right now you have some flexibility in gasoline, diesel, not so much jet fuel, because at this point I don't think you can give it away. So the focus is, how do we make product that we can store, with distillate having the most availability? So then we look at the global supply chain and think about refining abroad. Can it restart? And that's that supply demand that we've talked about. The supply is there, but the demand isn't there. And just based on the lack of demand across refined products, you've now missed, or you're struggling to find who's going to buy my oil, because at no matter what price, you can't find a buyer. So, but at the same time, when we look to restart the economy, or really try to get things back to normal, you need a cheaper diesel, cheaper gasoline, because these emerging markets are struggling. We've already seen issues across food scarcity. You've seen hoarding. We've had commentary from Russia banning wheat outside of their contractual obligations, as well as their treaties. We've seen Myanmar, Thailand, Turkey, Jordan, all put up some form of restrictions on everything from eggs to flour to wheat, Kazakhstan being a big one. So as we go forward and think about, well, what are the two staples? What should I focus on to say, Mark, you know what, this is actually happening? It's rice and wheat. Rice is a huge staple that China and India both rely on, and we've seen a huge hoarding that's starting to arise in Asia. And when you think about, well, what is the export? These countries export that product, bring in US dollars to help solidify their currency, help pay their debt, and really keep their economy stable. And right now you're seeing those dollars bleed away as exports are down, imports are rising because you need to buy your food, and you've already had 3 countries, Turkey, Indonesia, and Thailand, all come out supporting their currency, which just means they're selling dollars to buy their currency. So if you think about Indonesia and Thailand, those were 2 countries that were pivotal in the 1998 Asian currency crisis. So the fact that we're probably through, let's call it the 5th inning of this pandemic, in terms of trying to get to the other side, this is a really early stage to be supporting your currency. So as we think about inflation, as we think about food, and just how are we going to get things and products to these other places with freight unable to move, containers locked in cargo holds and in ports, you're starting to see this problem mount. So, now that we've talked a lot about the different parts of the supply chain, let's turn right back to the U.S. So Primary Vision puts out every week the national frac spread count and then the different basin breakdowns. So today we're going to talk about the national frac spread count, which today came in at 215. So if you don't know what a frac spread is, it is just a completion crews. It is the crew that comes in and actually completes the well once it's been drilled. Last week it was at 245, to give you an idea of how precipitous this drop has really been as crude has gone into a free fall. So when you think about, well, what is that on a year-on-year basis? That's a 55% drop. So when we look forward and say, well, what are things going to do going forward? The focus really is for us, it's going to continue to get worse. We have cash that's hard to come by, debt that can't be rolled, and people that just are essentially in a panic in terms of how low can prices go. So when we look at prices, we look at the realized prices, and the spot price is the best place to find that. The physical market is grossly oversupplied, which is going to continue to weigh on activity within the U.S. We would easily expect to see this at about 200 or lower as we head into next week. So when we look at things on a go forward level, we have to think of what are other grades doing, what is other flow. Nigeria has over 70% of May to sell, 60% of April to sell. And, they have this Goldilocks crude is what we like to call it, which is the medium sweet. West Africa, which is Angola, Nigeria, Gulf of Mexico, have these core grades that everybody needs, but yet they can't sell. So if they can't sell their crude, what does that mean for the U.S., which is facing tank tops, which could get as close to, I think we came up with about July at the current rate in terms of getting concerned for storage. So when we look at this, we're going to see spot prices continue to fall under pressure and futures continue to reflect that. We've had some rallies today on the hopes of some cuts, but realistically, the physical market, there is no bid. There's only offers out there, which is going to put pressure across the board and send frac spreads lower. So we'll be with you every Friday to give you an update. And again, it's Mark Rossano reporting with you from Primary Vision Network. Talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.